Welcome to our presentation. My name is Pat Whidden. I'm the chair of the East Hants Historical Society Museum and Archives Committee. Tonight our program is going to be about Gordon Stanley Hines. Gordon Hines was born in 1934 in Georgefield, Hants County, Nova Scotia. He was the son of George, Andrew, and Ida Vivian Nee Ettinger Hines of Elmsdale, Hants County. He grew up mostly in Georgefield. His mother died when he was young, and he was subsequently raised by his Georgefield grandparents. His father remarried. By his first wife, he had two other children, Glenwood and Peter Ellsworth. By his second wife, he had two children, Gordon's half-siblings, Margaret and Dean, and the second wife brought another sibling adopted into the family, Joan. Gordon enlisted in the Army in 1956 in Halifax, the Royal Canadian Regiment, 2nd Battalion, which was stationed in London, Ontario. He married, and during the course of his marriage had two daughters, Judy and Kim. One of the artifacts we have in our museum is a telegram to Gordon announcing the birth of Kim. He was deployed to Germany, Soest, in the mid-1960s and experienced an unfortunate accident while on a training maneuver in 1968. He died as a result of that and is buried in the cemetery in Werl in Germany. Because of his military deployment to Germany, he received Special Service Medal to commemorate that. We are fortunate that his family has gifted his military kit and documents pertaining to his role in the military to our society. And today, I am happy to introduce Kel Hancock, who is the president of West Hants Historical Society and a retired sergeant from the same regiment. Kel will speak about the circumstances that led to Canada having military bases in Germany, and he will tell us more about the items in this military collection that we are proud to exhibit this year in our museum. Kel.
Awesome, thank you very much, Pat, and thank you for the opportunity. I was very pleased when you approached me about this because this is a member of my regiment, and it's a duty for us to honor those who have gone before us. So it is a pleasure to be here today to talk a little bit about Corporal Hines and his service in the regiment and in Europe. In the 1960s, of course, Canadian Forces Europe, as part of NATO, increased their presence in Germany, particularly along the Iron Curtain. And this was all part of the arms race and the maneuvering of politics at the time. In 1968, I think the Berlin Wall was still relatively new, and it's unfortunate that this gentleman didn't get to live to see the day that it came down, because it certainly was a wonderful thing. A number of Canadian regiments and units were involved in CFE, which is Canadian Forces Europe, over the years. And I know my regiment had multiple 4- and 5-year tours of duty over there, and one of which, of course, Corporal Hines took part in. So in this binder here, I see you've put together a number of documents. These are training documents. These are lesson plans and timetables for courses, most of them to do with machine guns and anti-tank. But if you can see these little yellow cards, these are your lesson plans. Now you had to know everything on there. You had to teach it from memory. And this could be in your pocket, but heaven help you if you had to pick it out and look at it, right? Because then, of course, your credibility as an instructor takes a little bit of hit. From what I see going through these is a very professional soldier, someone who took this very seriously. And I can imagine he was quite an instructor. So it really speaks to what his job was, what his leadership job was, training training guys. Amazing stuff in here. You have some wonderful informational material that would have been put out by 2nd Battalion on the rotation to Germany. And what this does is it simply tells Canadian soldiers and their families what to expect in Germany. A lot of cultural stuff. As a matter of fact, this page here talks about what the Germans eat. So, as much as they could, they tried to give as much information to these guys, keeping in mind that a lot of these guys never left home until this. A dependent's guide for proceeding to Europe, and this was for dependents, for wives and families. And it was a handbook from them, this one from 1965, about what to expect and how to prepare for being posted to Germany. There's not very many soldiers I've ever talked to that have a bad memory from service in Germany. It was important to be there. It was important to be on that line. We all remember those days with Reagan and Gorbachev and the uncertainty. So having Canadian troops there certainly helped. This Astrakhan Klondike hat is quite interesting because I believe this is actually made from Persian lamb's wool, whereas today they're issued in their acrylic, artificial. We don't use them for anything. In fact, when I was in, I used mine for a car buffer because it was perfect for waxing your car. The 4-inch cap was blue, which, believe it or not, is an Army color, and with, of course, a red band. These would have been worn probably, I think, until 69 maybe, depending on the regiment. In our regiment, the 2nd Battalion, my battalion, were the last ones to get rid of the 4-inch cap with ceremonial wear. We're quite happy about that because it's not a very comfortable thing. The badge itself is what's referred to sometimes as the Star of David, sometimes it's referred to the Bath Star. It's a little bit different than the Bath Star. Nonetheless, it's quite a common star for British insignia for military and police. In the center of the star is Queen Victoria's cipher. And the Royal Canadian Regiment has been given the privilege of wearing her cipher forever. We don't have to change it when the monarch changes. The initials, VRI, stand for Victoria, Reginas, Imperatrix, which means Victoria, Queen and Empress. And that, of course, alludes to the fact that she was the Empress of India at that time. These are exceptional things. I'm not 100% sure how the guys employed putties in the 1960s, but of course we know from the First World War they were wrapped around the lower legs from the top of the ankle boot to your knee for protection. And I assume in the field the guys would have done the same thing. What we call a PAM here, pamphlet, published by the Army. The Canadian Army Manual of Training, Individual Training, Atomic, Biological, and Chemical Warfare. This would have been extremely, extremely important to Corporal Hines and all of his mates in CFE because of the threat of nuclear war at the time. And that was a huge part of why the guys were there. So this khaki belt, as you can see, it's actually painted with khaki paint as well. Could be worn in various configurations. Sometimes it would be worn over top of the tunic like this. Sometimes it'd be worn just with the pants and this service dress shirt underneath. For ceremonial duties, the buckle would remain the same, the regimental buckle. However, a white belt would be used. Standard issue Maroon Beret, used by the Airborne or before the Airborne Regiment, para companies in the regiment. So this would be a paratrooper's beret. We have some lovely things here. This would be part of a toiletry set. This little roll here would be part of a toiletry set as well. So these are all very personal items that would have been used in the field. Of course, boot brushes, lots of them, with Corporal Hines' name and number on them because we had to mark everything. And of course, these lovely swagger sticks. These swagger sticks, they were used variously over the years. In World War I, you see a lot of private soldiers having these in their hand in pictures. Later on, the swagger stick or the drill cane or the pay stick was usually only carried by senior NCOs, so anybody sergeant and above, and it was a symbol of authority. About swagger, it's about when you march and how you move back and forth, especially in my regiment. It's called the swagger. Old manuals of training, and these would be published by the military, and as an instructor, Corporal Hines would have been expected to know this subject matter by heart and be able to teach it to his soldiers. And in looking at some of these things, they're still not that much different from today, especially when dealing with marksmanship. In this case, you have some wonderful little things. And I'm sure that there's a lot of military guys that see this will recognize some of these things. You have mess cards and ration cards for the drinking mess and the eating mess on base. You have a base library card. I'm not sure how many times I actually use mine. And a number of personal things. Driver's license, military driver's license, which is different than a civilian driver's license. This telegram that Pat had mentioned earlier is absolutely amazing. You know, very succinct, like telegrams were. Baby girl born March 13th, both fine. Gene Hines, and that's it. Not like today, of course. This is a little guard for polishing your brass buttons so that you don't get brass polish on your uniform. So you put it over your button like this, and then you polish the button. And these have existed probably since at least the 18th century in some form. These are Canadian Forces attendance rolls. So here we have one here. That's from 2 RCR Support Company, Anti-Tank Platoon. So this little attendance roll would be Corporal Hines's Bible of his men. Their details would be in these books. Their name, their rank, date of birth, hat size, shoe size, everything about them. Wife's name, next of kin. And we had to know our troops. We had to know them well. So these little books help do that. One of the main purposes of the book is to take attendance, so you put check marks. What looks like a baggage tag for 2 RCR Fort York, Germany, and I know there's guys watching that will remember this well. Now this little belt, it could be Army issued, and in that case it would be meant to be worn with both Army clothes and civilian clothes. Or it could be something that is private, personal, that Corporal Hines bought himself. However, the key thing is, just like everything else, it's marked. This little brass shoulder title, RCR, and those would go on the top of your shoulder straps on a dress uniform, and these are still used today. And of course we have a few little cufflinks and things here. I'm not sure that they're uniform related, but definitely great little personal items. This nice little piece of memorabilia from Soest in Germany. Something quite personal. This is another great publication. It's a training manual for weapons, published by the regiment itself. Of course, in later years, an entire organization was formed to create Canadian Forces publications, and that were all standardized. And the units themselves stopped publishing their own information. Mind you, everything in here would be standard across the Army. Very detailed information on weapons training in here, and of course, Corporal Hines would have had to know this so that he could teach it. Corporal Hines is also an anti-tank gunner. I believe he was trained in the 106 recoilless rifle, which was a tank hunting gun. I'm not sure what this is. That looks more like a mortar to me, so he may have been mortar qualified as well. But I'll check into this for you and see if we can't positively identify what that weapon system is. This is a picture of Corporal Hines at the time. And I must say he does look like a very fit professional soldier, very common at the time. Those are the guys that I looked up to. This one here, danger unexploded bombs. So if there's any old Royals out there watching that know why the boys were in Churchill Falls, let the East Hants Historical Society or me know, because it's very interesting, particularly in garrison. Now sometimes when the units deployed to the field for field training, they switched to this bush dress that we have here, which is a lighter cotton material. And this would be the precursor of today's Canadian combat uniform. This, of course, very much based on the old British style battle dress. There are some changes made to this after the Second World War, minor things to distinguish it from Second World War battle dress, but this is pretty standard. As you can see, it has, even after all these years, it has some very nice creases in the pants, and that would be done with the use of spray starch. And this knife edge pleat along the front of the sleeve, which seems like a strange place for a pleat, or crease, sorry, on the sleeve. We're used to having them along our arm. This was so that it presented a nice flat, clean appearance to the sleeve, and of course the badges. This is simply a Royal Canadian Regiment shoulder title. It's not worn on today's combat clothing, but it is still worn on ceremonial or dress uniforms. This signifies Force Mobile Command, which in the 1960s, after unification and all the changes that were made to the military, this basically became the symbol of the Army, the land forces. His rank was corporal. I've just checked with a couple old guys that were in Germany at the time, and we think the crown signified a lance corporal or a 5B corporal, which would be the precursor to today's master corporal, which is one rank below a sergeant. Now, in Corporal Hines' day, as corporal, he did the job of a sergeant. Things are a little changed now. Sergeants lead sections of men in the Canadian military now, and master corporals are their second in commands. But in Corporal Hines' day, he would have been a section commander. So depending on where he was employed within the regiment, he could have anywhere from 4 to 10 guys under his command. He spent a lot of time in anti-armor platoon. This would be his trade qualification badge. This obviously is a tank in a set of crosshairs, which symbolizes a tank hunter, which is anti-armor's job. The crown would signify that he's in a leadership position. And I believe if there was a wreath underneath, it would mean that he was an advanced anti-armor gunner. On this side, of course, you see the same configuration except for here and these cross rifles. All us infantry guys are very proud of those because it's our bread and butter. Marksmanship. So this signifies that he was a marksman. If there was a crown above it, it would be an expert marksman, and then there's sharpshooter, and on you go. So that's basically the uniform. Very itchy, very hot, not comfortable at all. I had to wear this for a summer one time when I was still in the regiment doing Canada Remember parades all around the Maritimes, and it was brutal, but worth it. So one of the things that really struck me when I was looking through Corporal Hines' material was sort of the difference in his deployment with NATO in Germany compared to some of the deployments I did, for instance, Bosnia and Eritrea and Ethiopia. Corporal Hines is on a NATO mission. My 3 missions were United Nations, so there is a difference there. One is peacekeeping and one is actually warfighting. Anyway, in closing, I'd like to thank East Hants Historical Society and Pat for this opportunity to come down and to see this wonderful collection and talk a little bit based on my experience in the same regiment. Very honored and proud to see this display. It certainly honors Corporal Hines very well, and I hope that his family and all of his old mates get to see this. Thank you very much.